Ever walked through a shopping center and thought, wasn't there a donut king here? Or maybe you spotted a Gloria jeans you hadn't seen in years, their lights off, sign fading, and a lonely for lease sticker on the window. If you're an Aussie who grew up grabbing cinnamon donuts after school, or treating yourself to a caramel latte that definitely wasn't artisan, well, they were all under the umbrella of a fast food empire that once owned the Aussie food court, that now is barely holding on. That empire is Retail Food Group, or RFG. You might not know the name, but you definitely know their brands. Donut King, Michelle's Patisserie, Brumby's, Gloria Jeans, Crust Pizza, Pizza Capers, DeBella Coffee, The Coffee Guy, and Cafe To You, all of them sit under RFG's once mighty portfolio. And at its peak, this company was the kingpin of franchised food in Australia. Today though, their stock is trading for literal cents. Stores are vanishing from malls across the country. Franchisees have walked away, and customers, well, they stopped caring. So, what went wrong? Why did one of Australia's biggest food franchising groups go from mall royalty to cautionary tale? Let's roll back the clock. RFG was born in 1989, quietly operating out of the Gold Coast. For a while, they flew under the radar. They acquired well-known food brands and pumped them into shopping centers across the country. Their strategy was all about franchising. RFG licensed out the brands instead of operating them themselves. They sold the ingredients, took a cut of the sales, and called it a day. In theory, it was a genius plan. It was recurring income with minimal overhead. Let franchisees take the risk, and RFG just keeps clipping the ticket. They earned revenue from franchise fees, royalties, marketing contributions, and by selling branded products, often at a premium, back to their own stores. It was franchising on steroids. By the early 2010s, RFG had exploded. Their brands were everywhere. A Gloria Jeans in every food court, a Donut King next to every supermarket, a Crust Pizza on every second delivery app. By 2013, their stock was trending upwards as investors were thrilled and analysts praised the aggressive growth. It was a retail dream machine. But that dream had a dark side, and it was about to unravel. Behind the scenes, franchisees were drowning. Many reported being locked into long-term contracts that felt less like partnerships and more like traps. Fees kept stacking up. Royalties, advertising, ingredients, and sometimes even rent were all controlled by RFG. Some franchisees were struggling to pay themselves a living wage. Others were operating at a loss but couldn't get out without walking away from everything they'd built. And then RFG did something that pushed the entire model to the edge. They started opening more stores, sometimes right next to existing ones. Franchisees weren't just fighting their usual competition, they were fighting their own company as well. Because for RFG, every new franchise was a short-term cash injection, a big fee up front and more products sold into the system. But in the long term, it meant oversaturation, cannibalized sales, and a house of cards held up by new signups instead of sustainable growth. And it all came crashing down in December 2017. That's when the Sydney Morning Herald dropped a bombshell investigation. The article, titled "Cup of Sorrow: The Brutal Reality of Australia's Franchise King," was published, and it peeled back the curtain on what was really happening inside RFG. Franchisees shared heartbreaking stories of lost homes and failing marriages. People who had bet everything on their dream business were now bankrupt, all while RFG kept collecting its fees. The report accused the company of turning its franchise network into a profit machine for shareholders at the expense of real people's livelihoods. The public reaction was immediate, and it was brutal. RFG's share price had collapsed, wiping out hundreds of millions in market value. Within months, it had fallen to double digits, and eventually to single digits where it sits today. As of the recording of this video, it hasn't recovered. But the scandal wasn't the only thing working against RFG. Because while the headlines were hammering the company, the food world around it was transforming. Shopping centers, the beating heart of RFG's empire, were losing relevance. Malls that were once bustling on weekends now had more for lease signs than customers. And then of course, COVID arrived and turned the slow bleed into a crisis. People weren't hanging out in food courts anymore. They were ordering online, supporting local cafes, or skipping overpriced chains altogether. At the same time, Aussie consumer tastes were evolving fast. People wanted fresh, ethical, Instagrammable food. Things like small batch coffee, handmade pastries, and sourdough everything. In that world, Gloria Jeans started looking like a joke. Michelle's was stuck in 2006, and unless you were chasing nostalgia or dragging your kid through a Westfield, you weren't going to a Donut King on purpose. Meanwhile, crust pizza, once the fancy alternative to Domino's, had fallen behind the pack. Newer pizza chains were nailing modern branding and flavor, local pizza shops were winning on quality and personality, and crust stayed beige. So, with declining relevance, failing franchisees, and a destroyed public image, could RFG bounce back? Well, they tried. To be fair, they really tried. The company brought in new leadership, they restructured debt, sold off DiBella Coffee, and promised franchisees a new era of transparency and support. There were talks of store revamps, menu overhauls, digital ordering platforms, all the buzzwords you'd expect in a turnaround pitch. But here's the thing. When your core business model is built on volume over value, it's hard to fix it by polishing the surface. Because the real issue wasn't the donuts or the coffee or even the branding, it was that the system put corporate profits ahead of franchisee success. That trust between corporate and franchisee was broken. And without trust, you don't have a network. You just have a bunch of people trying to leave. So where does that leave RFG today? Well, the company's still listed on the ASX, still technically in business, and yes, a few stores are still open. But let's be honest, the golden years are long gone. Walk through almost any mall in Australia and you'll see the signs. A Donut King with no one in line, a Michelle's patisserie that looks like it hasn't had a fresh delivery all week, or a Gloria Jeans with one tired barista and a forgotten playlist echoing off the empty tables. The brands are still standing, but they're not exactly thriving. There's no real investor hype anymore, no exciting turnaround story. And most of the public doesn't even realize these brands are all part of the same group, but they can tell something's off. That spark these places used to have, it's not coming back. And that's what really stings. These brands were once genuine Aussie success stories, built on familiarity, convenience, and a bit of childhood nostalgia. But somewhere along the line, that connection got lost, replaced by spreadsheets, short-term thinking, and a franchise model that stopped serving the people who actually ran the stores. In the end, the collapse of retail food group is a warning to every company chasing rapid expansion without taking care of the people at the core of the business. You can only stretch so far before something breaks. And when it breaks, it's not just numbers on a balance sheet, it's someone's family, someone's future, and someone's dream. So, the next time you walk past an old Donut King or a quiet Gloria Jeans and wonder what happened, you'll know. You're looking at the ruins of a business that lost its way. It forgot to put people first, and in their industry, that comes with a high cost. In RFG's case, that's hundreds of millions of lost valuation and the loss of trust in their brand. So what do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below and let's discuss. And if you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so you never miss out on more deep dives like this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay curious.